After saving for years, I finally opened a tiny home hair salon. My grand opening was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But when clients started arriving, my neighbor blasted sirens, strobe lights, and air horns from his roof. When I went over begging, he shouted, "No one wants your trash business here. You're lowering our property value." By the end of the day, my first few clients had left terrified. When I finally closed up, I found my front window smashed and a spray-painted message across it, "Get out while you still can." I'm a 38-year-old single mom named April. I live just outside Fort Worth, Texas. For most of my adult life, I worked as a hairstylist. The hours were terrible. I missed my son's soccer games, school events, even some birthdays because my bosses cared more about squeezing in one more client than letting me live my life. So 5 years ago, I made a decision. I was going to open my own small salon at home. I started saving every extra penny. I did haircuts in my kitchen after hours. No vacations. No new clothes. I even skipped out on friends' weddings and baby showers to work overtime. Last year, it all paid off. I turned my detached garage into a fully legal, cozy, beautiful salon. 2 chairs. Clean, bright mirrors. New floors. Everything up to code. I passed every inspection with flying colors. By April, I was ready for my grand opening. My son helped me hang a tasteful sign out front, "April's Home Salon, Walk-ins Welcome." I was finally ready to work for myself. Or so I thought. The morning of my grand opening was perfect. Cool breeze. Sunny skies. My first client, Mrs. Gallegos, an older woman I'd known for years, pulled into my driveway at exactly 9 a.m. But before she could even get out of her car, a deafening siren blasted across the street. I ran outside in shock. My neighbor Gary stood on his rooftop. He had a bullhorn in one hand and giant strobe lights flashing red and blue. "Turn around," he yelled. "Nobody wants your trash business here. You're ruining the neighborhood." Mrs. Gallegos froze. She tried to wave me off like it was no big deal, but her hands were shaking. She still came inside. God bless her. But when my next 2 clients arrived, Gary added a new weapon, an air horn. Every time someone stepped onto my property, he blasted it. Lights flashing. Sirens screaming. One young mom brought her 2 little girls for haircuts. The second the lights hit them, the kids started crying and the moms sped off. I was humiliated. I marched across the street, fighting back tears. "Gary, please," I begged. "Just give me today. I've worked for this for years." He lifted the bullhorn. His face was red with anger. "Move your ghetto salon somewhere else. We didn't pay $500,000 for homes to live next to a strip mall." I tried to explain that the city approved my salon. I wasn't breaking any rules. He wasn't interested. By noon, more than half my appointments had canceled. The few who stayed were nervous and kept looking out the window like we were under attack. By 5, I gave up and closed early. When I went to lock the front door, my stomach dropped. The big front window was shattered. And spray-painted across the broken glass in red letters, "Get out while you still can." I called the police immediately. An officer came out, took pictures, wrote a report. But when I said I knew Gary did it, the officer shrugged. "Unless you have proof or a witness, there's not much we can do." That's when something inside me changed. I wasn't going to fold. I wasn't going to let some bitter man destroy what I built. If the police wouldn't stop him, I would. I filed for a restraining order. I listed the harassment, the destruction, the intimidation. It wasn't much, but it created a legal paper trail. While the paperwork processed, I kept my head down and smiled like nothing was wrong. Gary thought he'd won. But I wasn't planning to fight fair. I started watching Gary's house. I noticed strangers coming and going from his basement suite at all hours. Different cars. Different people. It didn't take long to figure out he was running an illegal Airbnb out of his basement. No permits. No taxes. No inspections. I called a contractor friend who'd worked with Gary once. The guy was more than happy to talk. Gary had knocked down a load-bearing wall to open up the space. He'd rewired parts of the basement himself, illegally. Fire hazard city. I took photos of guests coming and going. I documented the illegal construction. Then I contacted city code enforcement. One of my regular clients, Cody, is a real estate photographer with a drone license. I hired him to help. We created a fake online listing saying Gary's house was up for a foreclosure auction. Cody flew his drone over Gary's property, pretending to take listing photos. In reality, he was recording the illegal short-term renters, the dangerous fire pits, and the cracked support beam where Gary had knocked out the wall. Gary ran out screaming, "Get that drone out of here or I'll destroy it and sue." Cody got it all on camera. Since I now had a restraining order in place, his threats counted as a violation. I filed another police report. 2 weeks later, city inspectors arrived at Gary's door. They issued over $45,000 in fines for illegal rentals, unsafe construction, and multiple code violations. The county started investigating him for unpaid Airbnb taxes. The bank sent a cease and desist for illegal short-term rentals. But the best part? Gary had applied for a small business grant claiming veteran status. Except he'd been dishonorably discharged years ago. I tipped off the grant board. I also sent the information to a local news reporter who covers fraud cases. Gary's face was on the evening news the next night. His wife left him. She listed the house for sale immediately. Even after all that, Gary kept trying to harass me. He parked across from my house, staring. So I gathered more footage. I hired a lawyer. By the time we went to court, I had a mountain of evidence. Video of his threats, records of his illegal Airbnb, proof of the fines, and fraud, police reports, witness statements from my clients. Gary looked smug when he walked in. That look disappeared fast when the judge spoke. The court date was supposed to be the end of it, but life doesn't tie things up in neat bows. Gary showed up thinking he could talk his way out like he always did. The kind of guy who thinks he's smarter than everyone. When the judge reviewed everything, my restraining order, the fines, the illegal rentals, the fraud, his face hardened. Gary was ordered to pay me restitution for the window damage and harassment. $15,000. He also had to stay 500 feet away from me, my property, and my clients. The judge warned him, one more violation and he'd face criminal charges. For a moment, I felt relief, but it didn't last. A week after the court ruling, Gary's house went under contract. His wife had found a buyer fast. I thought, finally, he'll be gone soon. Then, late one night, my son and I were watching TV. We heard a loud thud outside. My son, Mark, froze. "Mom, someone's out there." I grabbed my phone and crept to the front window. Spray paint again. This time in black across my garage door. This isn't over. My heart dropped. I called the police. They arrived, took photos, and reviewed our security camera footage. The camera had caught someone in a hoodie running off, but the limp in his step was unmistakable. Gary had a bad knee from a car accident years ago. Still, the police said the footage was too blurry to make a positive ID. Gary was careful. He knew what he was doing. That's when I decided, no more waiting for him to mess up. I'd already hurt his wallet and his reputation. Now, I was going to hit where it would really destroy him, his pride and his future. I gathered all the info I had on Gary's illegal rentals. But instead of going back to the city or police, I took it to the neighborhood HOA board. See, the HOA had strict rules. No short-term rentals. No unapproved construction. Violators faced huge penalties and even forced property sales. I presented my case at the next HOA meeting. I brought photos, video clips, the court documents. The board members were shocked. Turns out, Gary had lied to them too. He'd told the HOA he never rented his home, that he was just having family stay over sometimes. The HOA fined him an additional $25,000. If he didn't pay, They'd put a lien on the house sale. Next, I contacted the buyer's real estate agent. I emailed the agent copies of the city violations, court rulings, and HOA fines. By law, those had to be disclosed, or the sale could be considered fraudulent. Within 48 hours, the buyer pulled out. Gary's wife was furious. She showed up at my door screaming that I had ruined their future. I didn't answer. I just handed the restraining order to the police who were already standing nearby. She was escorted off my property. I knew Gary wasn't the type to give up. He'd once mentioned to another neighbor he planned to start a mobile pest control business after the house sold. I did some digging. He'd applied for a new business license under his wife's maiden name to try and avoid the fraud record. I tipped off the licensing board and sent them copies of his dishonorable discharge papers and court fraud case. His license application was denied. A month later, I got a letter from a lawyer. Gary was suing me for defamation, harassment, and financial damages. I'll be honest, my stomach dropped. I knew it was nonsense, but lawsuits are expensive, even stupid ones. My lawyer reviewed the case and smiled. It's a desperate move. He knows he's done. We'll counter. So we did. We countersued for harassment, legal fees, and emotional distress. Gary had no idea that every move he made only built a stronger case against him. About 2 weeks before the court date for Gary's lawsuit, something happened I never expected. Gary's wife's new boyfriend, yes, she had moved on fast, contacted me through my salon's website. He wrote, "April, I don't like Gary either. I found something you might want to see." What he gave me. It was a file folder full of documents. Photos. A flash drive. Proof that Gary had been running not just illegal rentals, but also buying stolen tools and selling them out of his basement for years. A whole new level of criminal activity. I immediately turned it over to the police. As I typed this, Gary's lawsuit has been dropped. The police are investigating him for felony theft and fencing stolen goods. His house still hasn't sold. The liens and fines have piled so high, it's worth less than the debt attached to it. He's still living there alone. No wife. No money. No future. But I'm not done yet. There's still one more move I'm planning. Something that will make sure he never tries to start over and hurt someone else the way he hurt me. When I got that folder from Gary's ex-wife's boyfriend, it felt like the universe had handed me the last piece of the puzzle. But I paused. I sat in my salon, lights dim, thinking about everything. I had one. Gary had nothing left. No wife. No business. No money. No reputation. But deep down, part of me still felt angry. Not just at him, but at how far I'd let this take me. My son had seen too much. He'd heard the sirens. The screaming. The nights I cried behind my locked bedroom door so he wouldn't worry. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about making sure Gary couldn't hurt anyone ever again. So I made my last move. The stolen goods ring? That wasn't just a local crime. I contacted the Texas Department of Public Safety and gave them everything. Photos. Receipts. The flash drive. Client lists. Turns out, Gary had been buying stolen tools from shady contractors and flipping them online. Thousands of dollars worth. Within weeks, federal investigators showed up at Gary's door. Neighbors watched as agents hauled out boxes of evidence. He was arrested on felony charges, trafficking stolen property and tax fraud. By the time Gary went to trial, his house was in foreclosure. The bank repossessed it. It sold at auction for a fraction of its value. Gary stood in court in a cheap suit, gray and hunched, nothing like the angry bully who once screamed through a bullhorn at my clients. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in prison. He'd serve at least 5. No parole before then. Here's the part nobody tells you about revenge. It changes you. I had to explain to my son why police kept coming to our street. Why I spent hours talking to lawyers. Why I had to keep fighting instead of walking away. He told me once, "Mom, I just want things to be normal again. That broke me. I won, but my son had lost his peace. I also lost some clients along the way. Not everyone wanted to keep coming to a salon with police cars out front and neighborhood drama in the news. My business recovered, but it took longer than I expected. And part of me will always wonder if I had ignored Gary's first attack. If I had just moved my salon somewhere else, would my son have been happier? Maybe. But I also know this. If I'd backed down, Gary would have done it to someone else. And the next person might not have fought back. A few weeks ago, I took my son to the new park that opened near our neighborhood. We sat on a bench eating snow cones. He looked at me and said, "Mom, that guy's gone now, right?" Like really gone. I nodded. Really gone. He smiled. Good. You didn't let him win. Neither of us spoke for a while after that. Sometimes, winning doesn't feel like a celebration. But it's still worth it. My salon is still open. Still standing. Fully booked 3 months out. Gary? Last I heard, he's trying to appeal his sentence from inside prison. I doubt he'll get very far. Because this time, the whole town knows exactly who he really is. And so does the law.